My name is Alana Windrum, and I will be hosting today's session. I'm really excited to be here with all of you as we're going to explore some exciting topics in technology, AI, innovation, and ethics. Today's session is going to be called Future Ready Careers in the Age of AI. But let me just get a little bit started about our company. So for those who may be new to us, Teens in AI is a multi-award winning social impact initiative that was launched at the United Nations for Good Summit in 2018. Our mission is pretty simple: to empower the next generation of AI leaders and innovators. And over the years, we've been reaching an impact, reaching 35,000 young people across 100 countries worldwide, really making a global impact. Now let's just talk about a little bit of today's session. So in today's session, you will have a chance to explore how technology, automation, and global trends are transforming industries and creating new career opportunities across different fields. We'll also be learning about the essential skills that will remain valuable in the age of AI, and that includes creativity, critical thinking, communication, and adaptability. Then at the end of the session, we will have a feedback session on the talk and ask any questions to our speaker, Victoria. And that brings me, I'd like to introduce our speaker for the session, who is Victoria Sanel. Victoria is a senior AI and analytics consultant and tech lead at IBM, and is also a non-exclusive director at Teens in AI, who has championed responsible and inclusive AI. She has entered the tech industry via an apprenticeship route after studying English, geography, and philosophy. She has since completed her level 6 apprenticeship in 2024 and is now pursuing a level 7 master's apprenticeship in AI and data science while also working full-time. Her recognitions also include Women of the Year Award in Tech and Consultancy from the Women in Tech Excellence Awards last year, and also the runner-up Apprentice of the Year, which was awarded last year from Target Jobs Awards. So let us give a very, very warm welcome to Victoria, and I will now hand over to Victoria to get started.
I'm just gonna swap over to my screen share, so just bear with me.
No problem.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can all hear you absolutely fine.
Perfect. And then let me know if you can see my screen.
We can see your screen.
Perfect. So welcome to this talk. I'm going to quickly just go through a brief agenda and then we can get started. So I'm going to talk about what AI is, what it is today, and what it kind of means in the workplace at the moment, how AI is transforming work, some of the challenges that has come with AI being implemented into the industry, what we can do to prepare you for jobs that don't exist yet, how to use AI to help boost your employability, and just a few final things for you to take away. So I'll get started with AI today. When people used to think about AI, this is often what came to mind: humanoid robots or self-driving cars, some things that we sometimes see today. But it's not something that's used by everybody. There are things that can feel futuristic, a little bit distant, or sometimes even science fiction. And while some of that technology does exist, especially in Western countries where it can be more accessible, that's not actually how we experience AI day to day. The reality is AI is already part of your everyday life. When you scroll through social media, you'll see content recommended for you. If you're using Google Maps, how Google Photos or any other photo storing product will auto match your photos. Or if you want to watch something through Netflix or other streaming services, how those recommendations are fed to you, or even Spotify. I don't know if anyone listens to Spotify DJ, but I really like doing that. And this is just a few examples of how AI is working behind the scenes and how we interact with it on a day-to-day basis. It's quietly shaping what you can see, what you can choose, and how you interact with the world. But more recently, there's been a big shift. the current AI buzz that people are talking about a lot right now is generative AI. So tools you may have come into contact with, like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and Copilot. This broad term generative AI can also be referred to as large language models or LLMs, and I'll probably interchange between them throughout the rest of this. But these are slightly different because they're not just recommending things to you, they are creating. They can write, they can create ideas, they can help you learn. And they can also, in this scenario I'll talk about later, they can support you in preparing for jobs. So when we talk about AI today, we're not talking about the future anymore. We're talking about tools that are already part of your life and increasingly part of your future. So this session is about understanding what that means for you. What are the opportunities and challenges that come with it? And most importantly, how can you prepare to thrive in an AI-powered world? By the end of this session, my goal is that you'll see AI as not a threat, but a tool, and one that can support you amplify your skills and help you shape the future that you want. So this graph looks a little bit complex. Don't worry about reading the fine print. It's from a 2025 McKinsey survey, and it shows that nearly 9 out of 10 organizations are already using AI in at least one part of their business. That's a huge shift, and it's happening really, really quickly. Companies are not just experimenting with AI anymore, they're using it regularly. And the reason why they're doing this is because productivity often is a big metric for companies, and generative AI can help their employees and people work faster, and in some cases, people may say even smarter. So some examples of this could be drafting emails or reports, summarizing long documents, analyzing data a little bit more quickly, or generating ideas or solutions to problems. They can be a very good back and forth for employees in their day-to-day roles. And so instead of spending time on repetitive or time-consuming tasks, people can focus more on decision-making, creativity, and problem-solving. And this is why AI matters to you, because by the time you enter the workforce, or if you're already entering the workforce, using AI won't just be a nice to have skill, it will be expected. I know that in my workplace at IBM, we have to go on trainings now, and it's almost assumed that we will have these tools somewhere on our desktop to access. Which leads us to the next question. If AI is everywhere and everyone is using it now, what actually is it? So this is a very, very basic graph. And for those technologists out there, it could even be insulting, but this is a very simple way to share the concept. If you're unfamiliar with technology, I know that AI can come across as something mysterious or magical, but at its core, conceptually, it's actually quite a simple idea and largely based in pattern recognition. As a tool, it is very complex and intricate, but what it does is quite simple to understand. AI is when computers are designed to learn from data, a bit like how we would learn from experience. In other words, technology can recognize patterns, solve problems, and make decisions without being told exactly what to do step by step. So in this image, the AI has been trained on data, which would be lots of pictures of dogs and cats. And so it learns to spot the difference between cats and dogs based on the pattern it's been fed before. So large language models, for example, ChatGPT or Claude, work in a very similar way, but where the AI has been able to recognize that the cat on the right-hand side is actually a cat. Large language models have been trained on very, very large amounts of textual data to learn patterns in language. And so a very simple way to think of it is if, for example, somebody was giving me Japanese characters and I hadn't learned Japanese before, but they were telling me that I need to put different Japanese characters into different boxes based on which character it was. And I don't know this, but those Japanese characters could be the characters for the different elements: water, earth, air, fire. And I need to match those into the box right in front of me, which shows me earth, air, fire, and water. And I don't know what those characters mean, but over time and repetitive working, I know when a character is given to me which of those boxes it needs to go into, even though I don't actually understand what that character means. That's a little bit similar to how large language models work. They don't actually understand the text that they've been trained on, but they start to recognize patterns and they recognize where those words need to go. And so it's a very simplified way to explain this. But when you're talking with a large language model, what it's doing is essentially predicting the best next token. And a token can be a word or it can be a group of words to make a phrase. And so it's really important to understand what you're learning, what the AI is learning, because then you will better interact with it, because you recognize that the AI isn't this all-knowing human brain that we're so used to interacting with when we speak to our peers, but it's something that's been trained very methodically. And so AI isn't magic. It's a way of training computers to learn from data and use that knowledge to make smart predictions or decisions. And once you understand that, it can start to feel a lot less scary and more powerful because you understand what it's doing. So a few myths that I think are important to discuss. The first one is AI will take all our jobs. And this has been in the news a lot. And the truth is, AI does change jobs, but it doesn't erase the purpose of those jobs. It will change them, but it doesn't necessarily eliminate them all. It requires us to be more flexible and adapt. Some tasks will be automated, especially repetitive entry-level work, but new roles will also appear. So if you think of AI like the calculator when that first came out, or the internet, it didn't replace work or the way that we exist, but it did transform and change it. And the next one is you need to be a coder to use AI. So that's obviously very different now that we can easily access large language models. But I would say for this one, you don't need to code. You just need to be curious. You want to figure out how to use these tools and engage with them in a non-technical way. You can definitely do that. The most powerful skill is knowing how to ask the right questions when it comes to LLMs. And that's something called prompt engineering. And I can touch on that slightly later on. And then the last one is AI is always right. Definitely not. AI is only as good as the data it learns from. And even then, it's very susceptible to hallucinating, which is when, if you're talking to an LLM, it starts to make up random stories. Or you may have heard of the question, how many R's are there in the word strawberry? And it just can't seem to get to the correct number of R's. It's because it's not a human being and it doesn't interpret in the same way that we do. And it's really important to recognize that it can't be your complete truth. The data that it learns from is often susceptible to containing human bias or errors, and it doesn't really understand it or interpret it the way that we would do. And so critical thinking and keeping an open mind is very important when you're engaging with AI. So how AI is currently transforming work. AI isn't just something for tech companies. It's shaping almost every industry that you can think of: health, art, science, media, education, agriculture, the list goes on. I think it's touching most industries in some way. And while it's true that AI will change some jobs, this doesn't mean that all those roles will disappear, like I said in the last slide. The calculator didn't replace accountants. AI is looking like it's going to augment the work that we do and open new opportunities and create more time for us to do other things. Something that I really like is human-machine teaming. So not an over-reliance on AI to do everything on its own, because it's more than likely going to get something wrong. But how do we interact more meaningfully with AI and keep those very skilled people and just assist them essentially. So some examples of this is in agriculture. So we've got AI drones that can analyze soil health and crop health. And then when the farmer gets that feedback, the farmer can then make strategic decisions. We've also got in healthcare AI supporting diagnosis and anomalies, which can then enable doctors to provide treatment and patient care and see things from almost like a third perspective. And similarly in education, AI can support teachers in lesson plans, but teachers at the end of the day are the ones that are going to be creating that. And so that's something that I would really push for, is making sure that we're using AI in conjunction with our pre-existing skills. Okay, so next, some emerging jobs that have come from AI being implemented so vastly in industry. So if you're more technical and perhaps looking to start a pathway into the industry, here are some jobs that might be of interest. So the first one is an AI integration specialist. So that's somebody that would be able to implement in a technical way AI into pre-existing workflows, into pre-existing systems that different companies might use. The next one is prompt engineer. That's one you may have heard of because it's been quite big recently. And these are the people that know how to get the best responses from LLMs, generative AI, ChatGPT, and the likes. An AI strategist, somebody who can take business requirements and figure out where AI may be best placed to support a business or a person. Data scientist. Now, this one isn't, none of these are really necessarily brand new jobs, apart from prompt engineering, I would say is quite new. And data scientist is certainly not a brand new job, but they are becoming more important now that we are really heavily getting into this AI digital world. Something else I think is really interesting is a human AI interaction designer. So that's the person that will sit and look at how we will be interacting with LLMs, what sort of language will be used, what sort of, even if it's graphic design. And I think that's a really interesting job. And then the last one, which is very, very important, is an AI ethicist. So somebody who champions ethical AI, responsible AI, does work in relation to being transparent and may potentially work in governance and AI law. And so something that we need to talk about also is the challenges. We've seen so far how AI can help us and how it's slightly changing the workplace and what new things are coming forward, but it's not all straightforward. And there are some challenges that are very important to understand. And so the first one is bias in AI. I touched on this slightly already, but AI systems obviously learn from data, and then that data often reflects human bias. If the data is biased, AI can make unfair decisions. And some examples of this can be in hiring algorithms, facial recognition tools, or even credit scoring systems that have been shown to be biased against certain groups of people. And this is why it's really important to have human oversight. So that's human in the loop. Critical thinking, diverse data, and also diverse perspectives. And that's another reason why the work that Teens in AI do is so important, because having a wide group of representation when it comes to building the technology can have a real big impact on how the user at the end of that pipeline interacts with the AI and how safe and responsibly pushed out that technology is. And the next one is misinformation and over-reliance. As I said before, AI can spread misinformation, especially if it's trained on incorrect or misleading data. And so an over-reliance on AI, a reliance without questioning it, can be very risky. We need to remember that AI is a tool and is not going to be a replacement for human judgment. And so actually having people with specialist knowledge who have been trained in a very specific niche area is so important, even if a generative AI or an LLM has the ability to do much of the thinking. Having somebody to validate that is very important. Third one is inequality in access. Not everybody has equal access to AI tools or the skills to use them effectively. This can widen existing inequalities in society. So learning how to use AI safely and responsibly is really important. The last one is job changes and automation. So some jobs will evolve, and some tasks, as I said, the repetitive or the routine ones could be automated. This could happen in offices, for example, or factories, but humans aren't becoming irrelevant. Our roles are just shifting slightly, and this could be towards designing AI systems or interpreting results, making decisions that AI can't and should not make in the future. And the takeaway is AI comes with amazing opportunities, but we need to understand its limits, and there are many. Think critically and use it responsibly. There's also one more that I haven't included on this slide, and that is the environmental impact of AI. And I'm talking specifically here about generative AI, so large language models. And if you haven't seen in the news, but they require immense amounts of water in the data centers to keep them cooled, which has a great environmental impact. And so any way that you can be more environmentally conscious when you're using AI, so not for things that you might be able to just do very easily in your head, like 2 + 2 is 4, and those sorts of things. You can make choices to use it in a more responsible manner. Something that I also personally advocate for, if you have a laptop with enough compute, is I actually run large language models entirely off my own laptop, very small ones, because my laptop isn't big enough to host an entire data center worth of compute. But it runs enough so that I'm able to ask it questions if I need to. And that way I'm not relying on a big data center and using loads of water. So that's something to think about if you have the compute to do it. I'd be happy to talk about this separately, or answer any questions about this separately on how you would set that up. But it is a good consideration to have and something to certainly be aware of, because it is something that we're all inevitably going to be contributing to. And so now I'm going to move on to how to prepare for a job market that hasn't properly been defined yet. The most valuable skills in the future, I don't think, they won't just be technical, they'll be human skills, things that AI can't do well. You can't predict exactly what jobs are going to be like in the next 10 or 20 years, or even 5, but you can prepare yourself to adapt and thrive. And a big part of that is AI literacy. So learning to use AI smartly, safely, and effectively. And so here I'm really trying to push for hybrid skill sets. So understanding the technical side of things, or your domain knowledge if you want to go into marine biology, understanding the science behind that, but then also really emphasizing your soft skills. And those are things like curiosity, the ability to think critically, being proactive, being creative, being empathetic, because that's a real powerful tool to have. Even discernment, because it's not something that can be quite replicated in AI. It's not intelligent in the way that you and I are, and it can make mistakes, misunderstand context, or reflect bias from the data that it's trained on. And that's why understanding how it works and where it can go wrong is so important, because it means that we interact with it in a slightly different way. One practical skill I would tell you to perhaps go and look into now is prompt engineering, how to ask the AI the right question to give you better results, because you shouldn't depend on AI, you should direct it. It's a tool and it's not a replacement for your thinking. And prompt engineering can really give you the skill to be able to access information and responses that you're really looking for. You don't need to be a coder to get started. Explore any free AI tools, experiment with things. There's lots of free courses online. See how they can help you solve problems or be more creative. But I would emphasize not relying on it to give you the answers for things, but talking through a problem with an AI can be certainly a really good way of getting to an end goal. But the goal for here is understanding and curiosity, not memorizing code. And then don't forget that your human skills will keep you ahead no matter how AI evolves, whether you're working in a team, taking on challenges, thinking creatively to solve problems. That is building the foundation to thrive in an AI-powered world. And so the key takeaway from this is focus developing those skills, stay curious, and in an environment where we can't predict what's happening, you can prepare to be flexible and to be able to adapt quickly. And so really quickly, I'll talk through a few examples of how you can use AI to boost employability. And these are very transferable across however you may want to use AI in future. But here's a good example of how I'm trying to get to solve a problem that I'm inevitably needing to do on my own, but I'm getting support from a tool that can help me do it in a better way. So a few things that you could do to help you boost your employability with AI is you can ask it to help research employers and roles. You can ask for help drafting a CV. You can practice answering interview questions with an AI chatbot. I think this one's particularly useful. And you can check your writing tone or clarity. But a really important thing is to always review, personalize, and fact check anything that you're getting from generative AI. Cool. So I did an example a while ago to show how I used AI to find a role that would be relevant for me. So the prompt that I created is on the left-hand side, and I've asked it to take on a role, essentially. So I've said, act as a career coach and a job search assistant. I described who I am. I described what I studied. I described what I'm passionate about. And then I asked it to identify potential entry-level jobs that would suit me. I gave some more background about myself, so some of the skills I had, the location that I'm in, and then I gave a task, which is to suggest 5 to 7 job titles that align with what I'm interested and are relevant and in demand. And so that's how I've crafted this prompt, because I'll get a much more thorough response than just saying, I want to work in tech, please give me some job roles. So it came back with data analyst, because in my initial prompt, I said I'm a digital and technology solutions graduate. It came back telling me what it involves, the key skills, why it suits me, and where I can search for a role like this, which is all part of what I asked it to do in my prompt. It also came back with AI research assistant or analyst, but it came back with some very relevant things for my profile. And then it gave me some next practical steps, which was refine my personal brand, target my search, build connections and experience. And then it asked me to shortlist, if I wanted it to shortlist specific employers or graduate programs that were currently hiring. So I said yes. And it came back and it scoured the internet and it found a few roles for me that were actually hiring at that time. So there was a Barclays data and analytics graduate program and some other relevant ones, which meant that I could just click on the link and I was taken to that platform to be able to apply myself. And I think that's a very useful way, because especially in the job market, I remember when I was applying for IBM, it was very difficult to find jobs that I was very interested in to apply to. And so, I mean, this conversation took me maybe 10 minutes and it provided me with a list of things I could go and apply to. And so my final thoughts is, as much as AI can help you think faster, organize information, and explore new ideas, it can't replace the uniquely human values and skills that you have. such as empathy, creativity, judgment, and intuition. And in this slide, I have a photo of crutches, and then I have a photo on the right, which is a person wearing running shoes. And I like to describe AI in this manner. And the crutches represent the dependency that we can have on AI. If we were unable to do anything without AI, that would mean that AI is represented as a crutch. And if it was taken away from us, then we couldn't exist. Whereas I actually think it's more important to view AI as that support, the assistant, that pair of running shoes in your cupboard that perhaps makes you run a little quicker, makes you able to continue running for that little bit longer. And you're able to run perfectly well without it, but it does the extra bit to help you. And so that's how I would like you to see AI as well. We shouldn't be dependent on it. There's a study that Harvard are doing at the moment. It's very interesting. I would recommend you look into it, which is currently it's midway through, so they haven't got all their findings, but they're looking at the impact of AI on cognitive decline if we become too dependent on using these artificially intelligent tools. And so it's so important to keep exercising your brain, asking AI to support you in getting to a problem, but not giving you the answer to the problem because it may not always be right. So stay curious, keep learning, and be the human behind the technology. Use AI to support your decisions, but not make them for you. And your creativity and judgment and your ideas are what's going to shape the future. It's really powerful, but the real power in AI is how you use it. And I think that is the end. So I'm stop sharing now.
Amazing. Yes, thank you, Victoria. I hope everyone enjoyed and learned something from that session, just as I did. And now we will be moving on to our Q&A. So if everyone who has joined this call, please do share your thoughts and your questions to Victoria using the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. We have had some questions that were submitted to us when people were applying to the event. So I will start with one or two of those questions, and then we'll move over to the Q&A. So Victoria, a first question is, how can teens build AI literacy without the use of formal courses?
Well, I would probably say just start with experimenting, just be hands-on with AI. There's lots of free ways that you can access AI, and I'm talking here about generative AI. So I would definitely just, if you don't have access to any formal courses, then just get testing with it. However, I will say there's loads of free ones online. I'm sure you could find things on YouTube. And it's not totally inaccessible to do courses. But if you don't want to do courses, if that's not your style of learning, there's lots of really, really interesting books that people have written or articles. If you wanted to be really fancy, you could probably ask the AI what it can do to tell you how to become literate. But I would definitely recommend just getting hands-on and researching some papers. There's a lot out there on the internet.
Amazing. That's really great advice. I have another question. Small portfolio projects would prove readiness for an AI adjacent role.
Well, I've been finding a lot recently when I speak at work, speak to colleagues, is that because being AI literate is now becoming a must-have skill, being able to prove that you know how and when is the best time and place to use AI is a really, really good thing to add. And so that's a really good question. I would say I'll use actually my university as an example for this. I'm currently doing my master's, and they have a very good, I think, approach to using AI. And that is, we can't use it to do our assignments for us, obviously, but we can, it's encouraged to use it to help start off our assignments. So I code, and they have recommended that if we get into any errors, we can use AI to help debug, and then we can reference that really well when we're doing our write-up or our assignment. So I would say if you're doing any sort of project like coding or something in analytics, that's a really good example where you can ask for help through debugging, and then you can put it within your comments, or if you're doing a write-up, that would be a really good portfolio. Because most things in relation to AI tend to be analytics heavy or code related if you're going into an AI role. Or even just saying, like, I created this plan for this data pipeline and cross-referenced it with Claude, and Claude recommended that I add in these extra tests. That's probably a good way to document your own ability with usage of AI in that sense.
Makes sense. Let's go to a question from the Q&A from Andy. How can Bayesian networks be used for fraud detection?
Where is that question?
It's in the Q&A. Sorry, it's in the Q&A.
What was the question one more time? Sorry, I didn't hear. I can't find it.
Can Bayesian networks be used for fraud detection?
In fraud detection, do you mean like hallucinations or wrongly worded, like wrong responses?
There's been no specification, but maybe if you could just maybe chat on the use of Bayesian networks, and maybe it.
I don't have enough knowledge to answer that one, which makes me not probably the best person to ask this to. But if you're wanting to look at measuring right responses or hallucinations, there are quite a few metrics that you can use out there to basically analyze so there's something called RAGAS, which is I think it's RAG assessment, which you can implement to assess all the responses of several different large language models that you're using based on the content that you've given it, and that's how it can assess how well the large language model responds to any prompt that you're asking. So if you're trying to tackle the hallucination and bias side of things, I would recommend doing that. But I don't have enough knowledge to give a great answer for the Bayesian networks.
Sure, that's fine. I think that actually answers one of our questions from Aaron, which was how does AI get the right answer if there are many different coded answers, which I think you kind of explained a little bit with your RAG assessment. We have another question, and this is, could you explain the process for building your own AI or LLM?
So the process for building an LLM is quite extensive because you're having to train it on so much data. So I personally, with my clients, I find a pre-existing large language model, and we tend to do some work to figure out the one that they like the most because there's so many out there. And then we kind of build on top of that through retrieval augmented generation, which is where you're applying your own content, but you don't have to do the pre-existing training of the model. And then that way it becomes specialized into the domain area you're looking to be able to query. And then you've almost refined the LLM and tweaked it, fine-tuned it rather than building it. And so I have a lot more experience in doing that than building one because it's a very large task. I would recommend going, if you haven't heard of it, called Ollama. And Ollama is basically just a platform. It's an engine that carries lots and lots of different large language models that are open source and are available for you to download. So I would recommend toying around with some of those because there's some really good ones out there. And then if you want it to be domain specific to your whatever use case you're trying to use it for, then you can apply your own, whether it's system prompting, so it's your backend prompting, or your retrieve your own documents for RAG. That is something that we use with clients and it works really well. Something that I do day to day works really well because then it means I don't have to do the extensive work to build a model and then change it every time I need to use it for a different client.
Amazing. Sounds great. We have a sort of a personal career related question. So, how much did portfolio projects or other factors influence your hiring at IBM? And do you have any recommendations for like work experience or projects that could be useful in your current line of work?
So I think this is actually quite a relevant question for not just IBM, but kind of any company in this day and age that's related to tech. But for me, especially because I didn't come from a technical background and I'm still going through my technical learning process because I'm doing my master's at the moment, um, my CV was the biggest thing that I could show passion, enthusiasm, and motivation through because I didn't have portfolio projects. I didn't, at the time, I didn't have a GitHub repo with things that I've been working on. So if you've already got that, then you're way ahead of me. But what's really important, and I think this can be cross industry, is skills can be taught, but attributes and personality traits can't be taught. That's something that has to come intrinsically within you. And so if you're passionate about something, being able to show that through your CV is so important. And so anything that you've done of your own accord, I used to go to hackathons with Teens in AI when I was a teenager. And so I would include that in my CV because I was demonstrating that I was really passionate about joining the tech industry. I actually started off wanting to just be an AI ethicist. Um, and that even though I didn't necessarily have like a big portfolio of projects, I was going to events, I was doing the networking, I was attending calls like this, I was going to workshops to make myself more well-rounded in my knowledge. And especially if you're looking for an entry-level role, like an apprenticeship or a graduate job or an internship, that's really highly looked upon because most employers recognize that they can teach you the skills, but they need to have that they're looking for a specific type of person that they'll be able to teach those to. And so if you've got any little projects that you've been doing, like any random coding things that you've been doing on the side, that's amazing. But demonstrating that you're proactive is really important. So I would definitely recommend doing that.
And let's have a skill question. So, which soft skill do you think teens or students should practice first for future jobs?
Um, I would say the ability to continuously learn, adaptability and flexibility is so important for tech, especially because not not just AI, which is touching every industry, but specifically in tech, things are being released all the time. And so as a coder or someone in software engineering, you need to be constantly on the lookout for things that are coming up so you can upskill in those. But it's very similar for AI. You need to be conscious that things are going to change in your industry and you can't predict that change, but you can prepare for it in a way that means you don't get stuck in your ways. And you know that there's going to be a time where you're probably going to have to shift what you're doing, and being able to be flexible and knowing how to adapt is really important. So that's something that I would put much emphasis on. And the way you can practice that is by doing continuous learning whenever you get the time to go and spend the time to research something. Don't wait for it to come to you because that's proactivity. I would say there's probably the biggest things.
Amazing. And if we're speaking about learning, let's maybe touch on teachers. What do you think schools can do to help students from low resource areas to perhaps access AI opportunities or AI learning?
So in terms of lower resource, there are as I said, there are ways of being able to access large language models locally. It does require having a computer or a laptop and internet access for some time. But if you were to install Olama and a front end, say OpenWebUI, to then pull some of these large language models down onto your computer, you can then switch off your internet and you're able to access that. And that's something that I really like, because again, that doesn't have an environmental impact. And so if you don't have the resources to have lots of hardware, if you just had the one that kids could access, then that's great. If not, if you don't have that, but you have got consistent internet access, then there are obviously lots of free tools that are accessible online. Yeah.
Amazing. So we also have a question from someone who's asking about STEM education. So STEM education, for those that don't know, is obviously science, technology, engineering, and maths. Sometimes it's also referred to as STEAM. There is a concerned growing narrative that humanities disciplines are becoming more valuable in an AI-driven economy that covers areas that can't be, for example, like automated. So would you say that STEM education, like what do you think of the relevance of I guess, the education industry within it today?
I would say it's still important. There have been rumblings of people trying to guess what the future is going to look like with AI supporting many STEM tasks, because they are based in theory and analytics, and logic and rules. But what people are kind of assuming could happen is essentially there could be like a grand architect. And so instead of having a team of 5 developer, data scientist, designer, architects, etc., I've heard people say that they think there could just be a grand architect who has multiple agents working to do those tasks that they perhaps maybe would have had a bigger team to do. But that grand architect needs to have the knowledge to be able to monitor all those things, because I don't think it would ever be a good idea to fully trust any sort of artificially intelligent technology to do things autonomously. And so those skills are really relevant, but having a breadth of skills would support your kind of journey into STEM. And also on top of that, even if we don't get to this grand architect scenario, which I don't really know how plausible that is, it's just an interesting theory I've been met with. The people who utilize LLMs the best in the workplace, specifically my workplace, because I can talk about that, are the people who have the foundational knowledge of what they're actually asking for. And so they're not asking for answers that they don't know, they're asking to speed up a process. And so if it saves them an hour because they don't have to go through this mandrolic process of handling data or writing 100 lines of code to get to the output they need so they can go and do their next part on their own, they'll do that. And they know when they're getting response whether that code seems adequate, or if it's got itself confused in some way, or if it started hallucinating. And so actually having subject matter expert knowledge and domain experience is so important. And while yes, humanities are very great subjects, I studied that, I wouldn't divert your path if you're passionate about STEM, because you can certainly pursue a career. You just have to go in with the ideology that could potentially, your industry could change a bit. But part of the beauty of tech is you're also able to shape that. So I wouldn't necessarily divert if you aren't passionate about diverting, because there's still room in the industry, and you could potentially switch into building some of the stuff that's becoming autonomous.
Absolutely. And perhaps having one more question, and then we will close the Q&A. Do you think that there are AI models that are better than others, and what makes them better? Perhaps you can touch on this with maybe some personal or preferred tasks or preferred sort of reasons?
If I want general reasoning, I might use ChatGPT if I'm looking for like a bit of a back and forth conversation, because I personally quite like its conversational style. If I want to do something more technical or analytical, if I'm trying to debug some code, I will use Claude. Those are my two online ones that I would use. If you're looking at offline, so something that you've downloaded off Olama, Llama 3.2 tends to be my go-to conversational LLM. And if that fails, then I would do Gemma 3. Gemma 3 also, I think, is quite good at interpreting images on low bandwidth. And then I would say there's also another one called Moondream, but I would probably stick to Drama 3 if you're looking for visual stuff. Those would be my recommendations for models, but that it's very based on personal preference. I know some people prefer Gemini over ChatGPT. That's just like my experience with it, and like I know my clients tend to have very differing answers to that.
Absolutely, I can agree. I definitely swap and interchange between various LLMs and chatbots for certain use cases, certain projects. But with that, we are drawing to an end of our session. Thank you again so much, Victoria, for your time and for an amazing session covering on careers, AI, and innovation. Just want to thank everyone for joining the Teens in Action Forum. It's been really inspiring to see everyone's engagement, all of the amazing questions that we received as we've explored what happens when AI makes decisions and how we can shape a future where people still remain in control. So I hope that you leave this session with new ideas, insights, and motivation as we move deeper into a world of AI. But before we wrap up, I'd like to just share some amazing opportunities for you to continue your learning journey with Teens in AI. We are offering a 20% discount on any of our paid courses. You can use the coupon Teens in Action APR, which stands for April, at the checkout. We will be sending out a thank you email on Monday, which will also share some details of our newest upcoming courses, our coupons, and also some of our future events. We have been releasing new courses in AI, and these two new courses have actually been in partnership with Sage. The first one is Building AI Agents, which is your local green assistant, and this is a really phenomenal course being built by machine learning engineers and scientists over at Sage that will teach you on how to build a local LLM, both using Python, a minimal agent, and also creating a virtual and safe development environment. Next, we also have is getting career ready with prompt engineering. This was also a course developed by a machine learning scientist at Sage who teaches you a little bit more about advanced prompt engineering techniques and how you can apply them for your career journey. When we also have a summer program. This one's called the AI for Good Incubator. It's a sustainability and environmentally based 5-day program that is going to be hosted on the 10th, 14th of August. It is a full 5-day program. It's one of our biggest ones that we also host during the year. So that's going to be a really exciting program to look forward to. And lastly, if you are 16 and older, you can use the QR codes again on the right to access any of these links. But we also have an alumni community which offers some really amazing opportunities. So please do join us there. This call has been live streamed to YouTube and will be shared with everyone after the call. So again, thank you so much for joining us. And thanks for being a part of the mission and empowering the next generation of responsible AI leaders and innovators. And as Victoria mentioned, stay curious, keep learning, and remember that the future is in your hands. Thank you, everyone.